Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live broadcast. Today is Tuesday, May 18th in 2021, and we are still in a pandemic, but we're getting closer to the end, which is so nice. I want to acknowledge that I am streaming in from Treaty 13, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is still and home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We're grateful to be on this land to make music, to make art, and to call this place home. My guest tonight is a very special one for everyone. We're going to be talking throughout this entire time. If you have questions for my guest, put it in comments on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitch. Tweet us. We'd love to ask our special guest this question. And who is that person? My guest is Adrianne Pieczonka, one of the leading sopranos who also just happens to be Canadian. And hi, Adrianne. I'm going to run through a little bit of your bio. I hope you're okay with this. You are internationally celebrated for interpretations of Wagner, Strauss, Verdi, Puccini. You've brought life to such powerful women as Senta, Chrysothemis, Sieglinde, the Marschallin, the Kaiserin, Tosca, Elisabetta, and Emilia on leading opera and concert stages in Europe, North America, and Asia. In May 2019, you were appointed chair of voice at the Gould School, Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, where you give masterclasses, casting the spring opera, overseeing the voice department at the GGS. You're mentoring young singers, which is an incredible thing to be doing. And you are also an officer of the Order of Canada, the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. You were named Kammersängerin by the Austrian government. And in May 2013, you were named an honorary fellow of the Royal Conservatory of Music as well. You've kind of done a whole heck of a lot. You're also on the University of Western Wall of Fame, went to McMaster University. So it's kind of, you're a Canadian who's gone through the ranks, shared your talent around the world, and now I get to talk to you. So welcome.
Thank you, Joel. Lovely to be here. Really, really excited.
Same. So we are still in a pandemic, and I guess my first question, which I'm checking in with everyone, is how are you doing during COVID? How is it being? How are you coping?
Yeah, like you when you sort of in your greeting, I think we all feel maybe it's the nice weather that we've been having for the past couple of days. I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, my moods can be linked to the weather, and in those dark, rainy, raw days, I usually feel more down. And when the sun's out, I just feel like we got this, we can do this. So the fact that I think we are all feeling that summer basically is here. We've got May 24th, the long weekend coming up. It's the kickoff to summer. Our numbers, we know that the cases are trending down. That is all great, welcome news, because this has been a long haul. So, currently I'm doing well. And I think though, for the past 15 months, I think I've gone, I've had my ups and downs. Some days are better than others. Some weeks are better than others. I think we've all gone through the thing of, we've done the baking of the bread. We've done the gardening. We've done the, all those COVID crafts. We just want to get back to hugging people, to live music, to outdoor dining on a patio, having a drink with friends, So, and I think that those are sort of just, kind of if we reach out, we can touch it. I've had my first dose of the vaccine. I had that maybe about 6 weeks ago, and that's exciting. So yeah, I'm doing okay.
Good. That's good to hear. I think since the last time that I did one of these two, I've also had a shot in my arm. And so exactly, every kind of story that we hear makes us feel like we're getting closer to hopefully the end of this. So good news there. So this time for a lot of singers is an interruption, and that's really tough for obviously a huge generation of singers, including yourself, but you've also accomplished quite a bit over your career, where there weren't many thankful pandemics to get in the way there. And your professional debut at the COC was it was in 1988, which was kind of amazing. Lady Macbeth of Mitsank, which has been done more than once at the COC, which is kind of amazing. And then you came back as Mimi in La Boheme in 1994. And I even think we have a picture of that. We'll see if we can bring that up. But what an amazing, and there you are. Yeah, I believe that's it. Isn't that nice?
Yes.
Do you remember that? What
I do, and I was very much. I adored my leading man. That was Miroslav Dvorak, a wonderful Czech. He was such a hunk, and his brother. I started my career in Vienna, and his brother Peter was older. Peter. And Miro was the younger brother, and Peter was this famous guy, but Miro, I just thought was a dream, and he was the most lovely man. He sang like a dream, and was just such it was just a dream for me. I only sang Mimi in 2 different productions. I wish I'd sung it more because I just loved it. So yeah, I remember it very vividly. Richard Bradshaw conducted. It was a big deal. That was a big deal. When I made my debut in Lady Macbeth of Minsk, I'll preface that by saying I was still a student. I was in the chorus of the COC, which I think has kind of changed. I don't know if students now at opera school can get chorus, contracts, but back in my day, I could. So I had a chorus contract. And I sang in various operas. And the wonderful Donald Palumbo, who is the current chorus director of the Metropolitan Opera, he used to be, before Sandra Horst, he was the choral conductor at COC. And he's such a, he's like, Sandra is very much in his vein. He was a stickler. He was wonderful. I learned a lot from Donald. And Donald, there was a small role called Female Convict. I didn't have a name, but it's this little scene at the very end when Katarina goes to jail. She murders her husband, and she's in jail in Act 3. And I'm playing the female convict. And I have this one scene, really probably a 2-pager that I get this, not even an aria really, but I had to audition. And that was sort of my, and it's a bit confusing because if you say that I debuted in Lady Macbeth of Minsk, that the lead role, Katarina, is for a juicy dramatic soprano. So that wasn't the role that I did. I did this very small kind of bit part, but that was thrilling. But yeah, it was pretty great because I left Canada in the fall of '88. So I just was gone for nearly 20 years. So to come back in '94, as a Canadian, I felt, of course, great pressure to prove myself and to be good, but also a big honor to come and sing at the COC. This was back when we played at the O'Keefe, and that was that big old barn. But the barn I kind of loved. I kind of nostalgically miss the O'Keefe in certain ways, and it was pretty special.
And I guess from '88 to '94, like you said, as a student at U of T, and who was your voice teacher at U of T?
Yeah, my voice teacher at U of T was Mary Morrison, and yeah, it's an interesting because I did my undergrad at Western, and Mary taught at Western as well. But I, for some reason, didn't choose to study with her in my undergrad. And I studied with a wonderful teacher called Alvin Reimer, a baritone. But when I came to U of T, I went to Mary, and I credit Mary with, just developing my voice, opening my voice, helping me with the top, the extension to my voice. And she's a dear friend. Mary will turn 95 in November, and
wow.
I see her quite regularly. I speak to her regularly, and she still teaches at U of T. Like, it's like, are you kidding me? She's been Zoom teaching. And it's just remarkable that she lives for it. And I think I noticed what is this key between these wonderful, elderly teachers that are still full of life, with vitality. And I think it's because they are still working with young singers. Keeps them young.
And that must have been invigorating for her at the time, but also for you to sort of have the the energy, the ambition to sort of say, I want to leave Canada and sort of aim for the best, I guess. I've read somewhere that you were sort of very humbly Canadian, but also very ambitious at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think my choice is Joel, and I know that I auditioned for the COC, and back then they had the ensemble stream and they had what was called the Apprentice, and that no longer exists. Now it's just the kind of COC ensemble. But there were two streams, and I got offered the Apprentice, which was sort of the less, the beginner stream. And I knew what I would get to be an apprentice. I would still be in the chorus. And I might get the odd small, cameo role. And I kind of copied a friend of mine, Nancy Argenta, who's a wonderful Canadian Baroque soprano. And I saw that Nancy applied and was awarded a grant from the Canadian government, from the federal government for, back in the day, I'll tell you the amount, it was $14,000. And I applied and got that. So I got 14,000 Canadian, which I reckon must be around 50 grand in our money. And that allowed me, I mean, it was a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah.
And with that money, I moved to London and based myself there. And I didn't stay long in London. I ended up going to the continent, and I went to Vienna, which is another story. But I think I knew that you could stay in Canada. And of course, we've got regional companies, the COC, or you could go to the States. And again, of course, New York or, Chicago. But I don't know, maybe my father was born in Poland, maybe with kind of some European roots. And I was very interested in languages. I studied German, French. I like to speak these languages. I just sort of thought, wow, let's just go. Let's go to Europe.
Wow, that takes, I don't know, when you look back at young, like, I don't know, when I see young students now, that takes a lot of guts to do that. And that feeling of, I don't know, that maybe the COC at the time possibly underestimated what they had in their presence. But it's pretty safe to say probably that if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't necessarily have the career that you have, which is it. You had a lot of guts back then, which is incredible.
Well, yeah, I suppose, Joel, and I had, it's interesting. So when I ended up in Vienna, pretty well kind of just basically in 89, and started working there as part of the company. I had a few friends from my U of T days that came over that knew about me getting a job, and they said, "Oh, Adrianne, we'd like to come and audition, and could we stay with you?" So a few of them did. They stayed in my apartment, and they auditioned. And I must say that I think there was maybe just a couple. They came back saying, "You know what? This isn't for me. I don't know the language.
Right.
The map. I can't read the map. I'm freaked out. I'm going back to Canada." And I think, and I certainly didn't judge that. I think it's for every person to know their comfort zone. It was a trial by fire. My first 2 years were extremely difficult. The Austrians or the Viennese are a particular sort. They're very demanding, and I was chopped liver. I mean, I was not, and I had to prove myself, and I'd go home often in tears after a difficult rehearsal with a difficult director or choreographer. And they sort of said, this and this, you need to work on, or you're terrible. I mean, this is back in the day when people would just, nothing about being PC and watching what they said. It was just you're a disaster. My German was not up to snuff, and I'd go home in tears. And something made me stay. I suppose I could have said, "This is too hard. This, I want to go home," but I don't know why. I kept showing up, and of course, somehow then I did prove myself. I got better. I kept coaching, and the people at the theater, did help me step by step. And I did prove myself, and I kind of, that was a turning point. So there is that thing of, building a, thick skin. You'll find a lot of singers, Renee Fleming, who wrote a book, a lot of people will write about their failures, or the rejection, failures. And I think a lot of young singers might think, "Oh my God, it's so easy," or "Tell me the secret to stardom. Tell me the secret." And there isn't a secret. It's a lot of hard work, dedication, of showing up, and just keeping at it. You know that as a director, which is a very difficult field.
Absolutely. Yeah. That tough love is that probably nowadays we probably can't get away with some of the things that probably were more commonplace back then. So it's an interesting challenge for teachers and how to still challenge singers and students that way while still maintaining sort of that building up atmosphere. Yeah. So I'm talking to Adrianne Pieczonka, incredible soprano. If you have questions for her, please put them in the chat. Leave a comment. There is one already, which at what age did you know you could have a professional career?
That's a good. Thank you, Ann Jones. That's a good question. Often the question I get is, when did you know, or when did you start singing? And that's different. I had a real bug for the stage, and my first love was musical theater, was Broadway. I totally just wanted to be on Broadway. But I didn't know probably until I was maybe 18, and even later, that I had the vocal material to have a professional career. And I think, this isn't like ballet or gymnastics or ice dancing when you get young athletes that are very accomplished at a young age. Singing, the body is still developing, the vocal cords are still growing until you're sort of late teens into your 20s, especially for lower voice male singers. And it's not uncommon to get a young bass, that's just starting to study around mid-20s. But I think for sopranos, late teens, early 20s. And I think sort of some people supported me and said, oh, yes, I think you do have the talent, you do have the material. But every journey is different. You'll get some young singers that do study from a very young age. I'm always a bit wary about young girls starting to take serious voice lessons at the age of 13, 14. I started maybe around 16. Again, the voice is delicate, and you have to just be very careful with it and nurture it, and you need a good teacher. So it's a process, but around, I suppose, 20, I thought I want to be an opera singer. Yeah.
Amazing. So you went overseas, you kind of this is summing up many years, but all of a sudden you were singing at incredible opera houses all around the world, all the big ones, and Canada was still there. And I guess my question sort of is, how does your observances from how this art form is done all around the world compare or not compare to what you're seeing positively or as it relates to Canada, I guess? Is that a clear question? Probably not.
Yeah, no, it is, Joel. It's an interesting question. The way opera is done in Europe is quite different than how it's done in Canada. Here in Canada, if we take the COC, we're here in Toronto. Let's take the COC, which is Canada's leading and biggest opera company. Right now, the COC does 6 operas a year. It used to be 7 for a time, but that means 2 in the fall, 2 around winter time, and then 2 in the spring. And then the ballet gets inserted kind of maybe October, and then they do the Nutcracker at Christmas, and they also have a spring presence. If we compare that template of 6 operas plus ballet with the Vienna State Opera, that plays from September 1st to June 30th, every night of the week, rotating. So if we just took, COVID aside, if we took our present week and we looked up what was on at Vienna, you'll get Traviata, Peter Grimes, La Sonnambula, Romeo and Juliet Ballet, Eugene Onegin, maybe a concert every night of the week. So, and it's that, I'm trying to think of it's not stagione. Stagione is how we do it here, which means stations. I think in Europe it's the repertoire system, meaning that it's just this rotating rota of vast repertoire. So they're truly doing 30 operas a year on a rotating basis. So you it's like comparing kind of apples to oranges. So being over in Europe and I guess I have to preface that, but before I left, when I was a graduating student and I wanted to leave and I went to England, I hadn't seen a ton of opera in Canada. I'd been in a few in the chorus, but I wasn't a seasoned opera goer. I'd only seen a few, and to be honest, my first opera was Trovatore, which is such a convoluted opera, and I didn't love it. There was no subtitles, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? It was a slow progression, but so I went over, and I must say I was immersed in the European tradition. So when I came back, let's say for La Bohème, or later when I did The Ring or Valkyrie, and I moved back, it was a bit of a shock in a way to see that, we're doing less opera here, that there's just the season is more limited. It has its, it's got its finite slots of when you're doing it. And if we look at an opera company like Vancouver that used to have a full season that now is reduced, and we know that opera companies in Canada are financially, it's a struggle sometimes. It can't compare to Europe where there's big federal, supplements and sponsorship and BMW, and there's just a lot of funds. It's very rich. They really, put the money into the arts. They funnel funds into the arts. They're more part of day-to-day society, and I suppose they are more appreciated and valued. Here in this country, we're a younger country. I'd say number one, the first love here is sports. It's the Maple Leafs, it's hockey, and I get that, So we're big on sports. We're big on what else? The outdoors, and that's just who we are as Canadians.
Yeah.
And we know with politicians, whether it's Justin Trudeau or Ford, that we know the arts, don't cut funding to the arts, whether it's in schools or community centers. And as against the grain, probably fighting for your support and funds to keep you going. You need that help from the government. And probably you're always fighting for, please help us grow, help us maintain. In Europe, it's much more maintainable. It's just sort of, the word in German is selbstverständlich, which means it's just taken for granted that the arts are supported.
I remember walking by Deutsche Oper Berlin, where they would have a flagpole sort of just saying what is playing today. So it's kind of like every day, like you said, there was a different show that, depending on your resources, very reasonably as well, you could go for 6 to 13 euros and just sit and enjoy either a brand new production or one that's been around for 30 years. And it was kind of, you'd see all different ages as well, which was kind of incredible. Yeah. Big differences. Okay. You've been singing, you've got this incredible career, and I read somewhere as well that you don't want to sing sort of all the really old lady roles and stuff like that. And so is there still a role that you haven't sung yet that you are dying to sing?
Yeah, I think I'm asked this on occasion, and I think my answer is actually no. I'm so satisfied. I've sung for 33 years professionally, and I mean, I'm really proud of that track record, and I've sung such great heroines. There are a few, the role of Isolde, I've never sung, and it was one that if I were going to do it, I should have already done it. So that's kind of one that got away. But does it bother me? The answer is no. It's not. And then it's an interesting thing that you raise. I'm 58, so we all know that if we take Placido Domingo, male singers, just by nature have a longer shelf life than female singers, and sopranos, I think, get the shortest straw. The lower voices can kind of go on a bit longer. So a lot of women my age, sopranos, will tend to kind of look at their careers, and they're not getting the wide array of repertoire because we're older. And if people want to cast the Countess, or, they'll want a 30-year-old, and that's totally understandable. So my options are kind of narrowing. One option that some of my colleagues, wonderful artists, do, they end up singing kind of the grandmothers or the evil witch, or I call them, the bags and witches. And there's some wonderful roles that there are. And I don't know if that's for me, and things can shift. Right now, I decided I've always wanted to teach. I'm interested in teaching. A lot of singers aren't, a lot of big opera stars or stuff, they sing, and then when they retire or something, they just, are not necessarily born teachers. But I'm keen, I'm interested to teach. So I knew that I wanted to have this as a parallel thing, and I'm enjoying it. And I am still singing. One of my loves, when I mentioned Broadway, I would love someone to offer me like something intro, like a musical number, like a musical theater piece. Whether it's contemporary, whether it's, Showboat, Camelot, I don't know, I really would welcome that, because I think it would suit me. And I know that like Renee Fleming has, been on Broadway, the crossover repertoire. I think it'd be fun, refreshing. And I just love that genre.
Yeah, new energy in it, like a new challenge, but also something that you can do. Yeah. Oh, and again, you're by no means the age of retirement at all. Like, you're still very young, but it's interesting to sort of see how that planning is in terms of a career and having a choice, having ownership over what you want to do and when you want to do that. That's incredible. And it's great to have you back in Canada. I remember very fondly, and I think we have a picture of you. I was lucky enough to work on Robert Carson's production of Dialogue of the Carmelites, where you sang Madame Lidouane, which was so powerful, but also how the energy of everyone excited to hear you sing in this role in Canada, in Toronto, was so exciting as well. It was a powerhouse of a Canadian cast of just different artists in their different phases of their career as well. Yeah, very special production.
That's right. There was, There was Judy Forst, and Judy's, a little bit older than me. So, Judy played the kind of the grandmother figure, if you will. And then we had Isabelle Barak-Darian, who's younger than me. So yeah, listen, Canada has such great, your wife, to name one, Miriam Khalil, we have a rich array of wonderful singers. And often I get asked when I go to Europe, what is it with you Canadians? Is it, is it something in the water? Ben Heppner, like the big stars. We've got Sandra now. I think we're a good training ground. I think we're training, we're really training great singers. And there are singers out in the world right now, in Europe, around the world, doing great things, Canadians. So
that's a great transition to you've been the vocal chair and head of the voice department since 2019. And personally, I'm very proud of how the Glenn Gould School and the RCM, they find singers which are incredible, and then they go on to have careers as well. And so what have you learned in this incredible sort of mentorship teaching role?
Yeah, Joel, it's been a learning curve, to be honest. The only teaching I've done has been like privately. If someone sort of emails me, or I'm working on an engagement and someone comes up and says, "Oh, do you teach? Could we meet, next Tuesday?" And so I'll meet and I'll work with someone, but usually it's for a short period of time, and then I leave or the person leaves. So this was a regular, and I, to be honest, I was sort of like, nervous about it, because I'd never done an academic role, leading a department. My first year, I didn't have any private voice students, but this year I started having a few of my own, and next year I'll have a few more, which means that I'm giving master classes, casting the operas, facilitating various classes or issues. Some students are having, problems or whatever, they come to me, and then also teaching my own singers. So it's really been I've just learned so much. I've learned a bit about business, and maybe, like, so you're a director, you're an artist, but you're also a businessman. You're running this company. And I think I've read a few business books. I mean, just to educate myself, because basically as a singer, my job was to show up and sing to the best of my ability. And that's all I had to worry about. And in that, there's a great beauty to that. And basically, when my rehearsal was done, I could go home and watch a program on TV and decompress, make some dinner, and I didn't have any other pressures on me. And this job, on any given day, I've got a student that's fallen ill. I've got a masterclass person. There's been a show on Netflix called Little Fires Everywhere. And I think this is like, there's little fires everywhere that need to be put out and attended to. The school has just done a virtual convocation. So these poor students have, just graduated and, on Zoom, and it's, but the Glenn Gould is very different than Western. I went to University of Western Ontario, which is a big music school, and U of T is a huge music school. The Glenn Gould School has 24 vocal students at any given time, and that's both graduate and undergraduate. So it's, I think U of T maybe has, I don't know the exact numbers, but many more times than that. So it's very small. You could call it sort of boutique, and that's both positive, but when you're casting an opera, it's challenging. And you've been to school. You directed most recently, I believe, Magic Flute, and I know you've done other shows as well. And it's single cast. Often U of T will double cast things, but we have a finite amount of voices that we need to make it work. And usually things do work. Strangely.
No, and that's what they do. It's a very special program that. It's really a golden program that if singers don't know about it, they should definitely check it out. It's well supported, and the training is top notch. I read somewhere that a piece of advice that you have said is slow and steady wins the race. And I want to apply that to two things. We have a question from someone that says, do you envision a teaching career like Mary Morrison? And yeah, Gillian Cummings.
Oh, that's Jillian. Oh, my call. Yes, that's my lovely colleague from Glenn Gould. If that is if maybe there's another Jillian Cummings. If it's you, Jillian, I miss you. Mwah, mwah. So yes, I do envision myself becoming. I mean, I would be honored to be like Mary. Mary. Mary was my mentor. She, my inspiration. And basically, as I say, and I had a very important teacher in Vienna, kind of my Viennese Mary Morrison, and her name was Hilda Tzadek, and Hilda died at the age of 101 in 2019. Wow. And again, talk about longevity. So Hilda taught until her late 90s. So again, this connection with these wonderful women who were teaching into their 90s, getting energy and inspiration and going to recitals and going to concerts. And I just think it's the way to go. So yeah, I plan to emulate Mary and Hilda and, foster and mentor these singers. I get so much back. They give me so much energy and inspiration. And it's, sometimes you're a bit of a, they come to you with some problems. It's not always easy, but it's a very rewarding, Joel. And actually it's interesting because as a singer, you've got this ego. And I think as a director, you need a healthy ego to be in this business. Mm-hmm. And I was maybe nervous thinking, well, when I slow down and when I eventually stop singing, what will my singer ego, will it be able to be okay? And I think the teaching is actually a very nice way for, the ego. It's still something that you're giving out. You're still performing. You're still, in that respect, in the business. Maybe not singing yourself, but you're working on repertoire with the young artist, and you're sort of molding and shaping them. So, now you asked another question before that, so I've kind of gone off track, but I can't remember what that was.
No, that's good. And it kind of resonates. There's a really not a heavy question, but it's one that, I'm sure many people wonder, especially during these COVID times. But one question that one viewer asks, which but essentially, how many young singers studying opera today can truly expect to have a career? And I'm sure that question gets asked in terms of, can we influence that? Percentages are difficult, but I think if anyone had said that to you, that you can't or can have a career when you were young, it seemed like you took that internally and then sort of did something with that.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure if Alex's question also is linked a little bit to COVID when he says post 2021. COVID for sure has changed the business. It's sort of really shone a light, and I think the business will and adapt and change. But I have to again talk about when I got into the business professionally in the late 80s, there was this golden age of kind of opera. There's been many golden ages, the 50s, 60s, but the 80s was a big, if you think about Placido Domingo driving around in a limo, the three tenors doing that concert with, Zubin Mehta, the money, the wealth, the recording industry, you had Deutsche Grammophon, you had stars being asked to do CD after CD. Everything, we know that Gregorian, the CD, the classical music shop in Yorkville shut. The recording industry is basically it's dying. When you've got Spotify and you can have things on Apple Music, but when I started out, there still was a boom, and I benefited from that. And the other thing also, I had even people sort of say to me, if you're half decent American or Canadian singer, go over to Europe in the fall for these kind of meat market cattle call auditions, and if you're halfway decent, you'll get a job somewhere. And fast forward now, 35 years, this is no longer the case. Even these jobs in sort of small regional German houses are being highly sought after and contested by many, many singers that want just a foot in the door, and the pay is not great. The pay is one can barely live on, the starting salary for some of these jobs, but still the competition is bigger than ever because we've had the Eastern Europe open up, countries like Georgia, Azerbaijan, of course, Russia, Ukraine, White Russia, and you've got all these singers. If you just look at the Metropolitan Opera recent Met finals, it's Korea, a bit of Japan, China, and these singers are amazing. And back in my day, we didn't have the Asian singers. They weren't influxed. You had a few stars like Sumi Jo, the odd maybe Japanese star. But now, if you look at the young programs down in the States or competitions, you get Chinese, these amazing artists from Korea, and China, and of course, Eastern Europe that have flooded the market. So again, that just floods it with more and more competition, and it is daunting. And yet, it's sort of hard for me. Is it my job to sort of say to a young student, even if they're, they come to me and they're singing, halfway decently, is it my job to say, you'll never make it, I think you should go be an accountant? And I kind of told myself, I don't think it is my job necessarily to tell someone, you need to switch careers. I think it's part of the process that a singer needs to go through, a young singer, to step by step. Am I progressing? Am I getting a lot of, am I progressing, or is it just one shut door after the next? And that is a sign, unfortunately. So I know, Joel, I'm pivoting back to your question of slow and steady wins the race. And I didn't comment on that. And what I mean by that, I've had a long career of over 30 years, and I think the trend sometimes more and more is to have a star. We get Anna Netrebko, who's a wonderful, everyone knows Anna, this fiery, larger-than-life Russian diva. And Anna burst onto the scene, I think sort of in the mid-90s, maybe early 90s, mid-90s in Salzburg, and I was there. And so Anna kind of lights up the stage. And after about 5 to 10 years, we get impatient and we want the new Anna. We want a new incarnation of a young, beautiful, someone new and shiny. And I think this trend to kind of, we know that it's a conveyor belt and one is replaceable. And it's kind of ruthless. It's almost a sort of like sports. I've watched some things about Olympians, and these poor Olympians, if they're not at the top of their game, they know that the next person is waiting to replace them. But I like to tell singers to be patient, to not sing beyond their vocal ability. And that's also often you'll get a teacher that says, oh, I think you should do this. You should sing Brunhilde, when in fact, maybe that's not prudent. Brunhilde needs to wait 5 to 10 years. So there's, I think I guess the parting words would be know thyself, really know your voice, know yourself. Yes, have a trusted team of your singer and your coach, your parents. I mean, who knows, but really know your own voice and your inner voice.
That's great words to sort of treasure and have, especially during these times. And, we're seeing in schools, COVID has obviously been a very difficult time for students in school, and the GGS, the spring opera, is another sort of form of the resiliency that you've shown during COVID. And so, how have your students been during COVID? How's that resilience been? The Rape of Lucretia was an incredibly powerful, simple production, and so what are they learning and how have they been?
I'd say some students are doing better than others, and I think that's probably across the board, whether it's in high schools in Toronto or universities. Some have even flourished, and I talked to some of my colleagues, my voice teachers, and some of them say, well, I'm finding that my one particular student is making a lot of sort of technical progress, and some, I think, we know that Zoom lessons are a thing, and with Zoom I can get really close and I can look at the tongue and we can do all sorts of stuff that has value, and sometimes that can help. I think there's nothing like being in the same room with a singer, and we've been able to actually do quite a bit of in-person voice lessons. But some singers have struggled, and we decided to do The Rape of Lucretia filmed in Kerner Hall, but it was a live performance, and the singers were in these plexiglass cubes with all these cameras. So it was daunting. I mean, I think if were 20, 21 and in the cast, I think how would we, everyone's got the mask on and they come and disinfect the thing, and so you get the red light, okay, action. It's not just singing the thing, it's all these other layers as well. And then you come off and have to disinfect, and then they have to do the fogging. Students have anxiety. The staff has anxiety. And I tried to just, almost acknowledge that and support them, talk about it. I think it's remarkable that we were able to do it. We talked about maybe switching it and maybe doing it in June or maybe waiting till the fall. But we had a beautiful window in March where we were able to be in Kerner Hall. And I just thought, let's do it. We had 4 days and we went in and rehearsed it, and then we filmed it. And I think had we waited, well, the lockdown then clamped really tightly and we would still be locked out of Kerner Hall. So for that respect, I'm grateful, and it was a good call.
It's a thing where it's probably not exactly what anyone envisioned, but I'm a huge fan for the advancement of what this art form is, and the way that we've been forced into using technology in some degrees, I think has been really valuable for those who have embraced it or are learning a lot. And I call it a bit the age of the self-producer, is we're seeing people have the capabilities and the technology to be able to do it on their own, and it's just new skills that they're picking up. And so I'm hopeful of coming out of this time, we'll see so much creativity.
I second that, Joel. I absolutely second it, and I cite your wonderful the Messiah Project, which was just, I think I wrote you immediately saying, why isn't this on CBC like on a Sunday night at 7 o'clock leading up to Christmas? I felt so important for us, for every viewer to be able to see it, not that it would speak to people, not just people into classical music. I felt that it was something that touched me as a Canadian, and yes, as a musician, it was a humanitarian revelation. But you're right, I look at what these young people are putting, learning about tech, putting up their own shows, whether it's tapestry opera or Against the Grain. It's so exciting, and the creativity is booming. And yeah, it's on a smaller scale, but I do think that this is the way that we will be, and this is the silver lining perhaps of COVID. We have had to adapt, and we need to take what we've learned. I think Zoom will be with us. I think we'll use it. We'll use whether it's in auditions or presentations, or even performances, that there'll be a duality. At maybe Against the Grain, you'll have a show with in-house, and then you might have something online too. Mm-hmm. It could be a hybrid. Very interesting to see what's going to happen.
So that kind of leads into, as we kind of look to wrap up our time, but what are you most looking forward to once we're all vaccinated, once sort of we get the green light? Is there one thing that you're most looking forward to?
Well, this sounds like really hokey and corny, but like I can imagine being at some like maybe either at the at the Four Seasons or Kerner Hall, or some even I suppose even at a baseball game, and getting together and standing up and singing the national anthem and singing our hearts out and our lungs. And we know that singing has been kind of a no-no because of all, but being able to sing, and I love choral singing, and I love to sing in a large group, not only, sing arias and as an opera. I love to sing and raise our voices together. So to sing the national anthem before, with the orchestra playing, I'd be weeping. Like I would just be a puddle of joy and emotion to witness that. And I think that day will come, and I'm sure everywhere there will not be a dry eye for many, and that we're getting there.
We are getting there, and that's what's so positive to feel. The sun is shining, and yeah, we're getting there closer. So one last thought is, you've done something good in your career when the federal government, our entire country, acknowledges you. And I was fortunate enough to talk to Gerald Finley earlier. And how does it feel? You've been on a stamp, Canadian postal stamp. There you are in all your splendor. How did that feel when you were approached with it, and then when you actually saw it?
I don't know, Joel, there were no words, and it was all, how it was done. I'm not sure if Jerry, recounted it differently. It was basically a done deal. Like, I think I got the call saying, basically, it wasn't like, would you like to be on the stamp? It was like, we've chosen you. They kind of summoned, maybe a committee said, you're going to be on a stamp. And actually, and that photo or that picture is from a photo from Don Carlo. The role is Elisabetta. And that is from the production at COC. So it's wonderful. It's like that was done at the COC in 2006. And it was supposed to be Richard conducted, and he, died right before, a couple of months. Anyway, it was a beautiful production, and I was very happy that they chose that image, and then they kind of made it into a cartoon, if you know what I mean, made it into that drawn image. So I just was thrilled, and the best thing was I got to fly out to Calgary for kind of a, inauguration or sort of a celebration where they several of us were sort of inducted or received the stamp, and it was a very exciting couple of days. And and Canada Post gave me like a thing this thick with stamps, so I almost have stamps for the rest of my life. It's very good, but I don't like to use the one with me. I'll use Jerry a lot. Yeah. And other people. But anyway, it's a huge honor. I just, it's the thing that you're pinching yourself going, what? It's truly an honor. And I must say, since coming back to Canada, I lived in Europe for nearly 20 years. I feel so honored and respected or acknowledged by my country, which is just remarkable. So my gratitude for this country, for music lovers, for fans, for everything. It's really just been beyond my dreams.
Well, you've done Canada proud, and you've represented Canada so honorably and so beautifully. The fans are actually demanding this. I was going to wrap it up, but they have one more question, and so we have to ask this, if you don't mind. How did it feel to embody these roles on these big stages? That's what Sydney's wondering.
Okay.
Oh.
Yes. Well, it feels incredible. I mean, and what's weird, I think it's interesting, Joel, to kind of go down memory lane. I don't often look. I don't look at my CDs or my DVDs. I've got an office on the 3rd floor that I keep all that stuff, and I really kept a lot of the programs. And I think, and occasionally I'll go in and kind of look through something from La Scala or the Metropolitan Opera or, Salzburg Festival or Bayreuth. And I do kind of get like, what? Like, I was where? And, but when you're doing it, you don't have the sense of, I'll be on that iconic stage of La Scala. You're working, you're doing your best, you're kind of tunnel vision. And it's only kind of with a bit of distance, you go, wow, I guess that was a big deal. Like, and I'm not trying to be humble here. I think I am rather down to earth, but I think it's just a thing. And I think Jerry is the exact same way. He's just doing his craft. He's just singing those roles. And you don't have that kind of, but of course it's an honor to sing on these wonderful stages. In Los Angeles, I got to wear the jewels that Maria Callas had worn when I sang Tosca, and they came with a special guard every night. I think they were insured for thousands and thousands of dollars, and so this guard would come into my dressing room and like take out the tiara. And I, what an honor to think that I could be wearing something that she had worn. So it's just, it is beyond, my career has been beyond my wildest dreams. And that doesn't, but there's small things too. And if you're starting out, Sydney, getting your first concert or recital or something in a church, I tell you, the thrills for my first concert or my first solo rank up there. I mean, and so you start small and you just grow from that, because we all know that you need to start at the beginning. And it's just follow the path, and I'm sure you'll do very, very well.
Adrianne, thank you so much. You have inspired so many people as a performer, and you still are inspiring so many people as a performer. And now you're working with the next generation. And as my dad would say, the best is yet to come. So thank you so much for taking the time tonight to talk.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks, everyone. It's been my pleasure. Stay well and happy summer, everyone. Thank you.
That is the incredible soprano, who is an incredibly kind and generous person, Adrianne Pieczonka. Thank you for tuning in for this chat. Please stay tuned for over the coming weeks. Against the Grain has some exciting announcements for further programming. We don't have one of these talks coming up in June because we may have something special coming up. So stay tuned, stay focused, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.